Have you ever thought that a simple video call could reveal a dark secret? What happens when distance becomes the perfect accomplice to betrayal? What if what seems like a long-distance love story hides something much more disturbing? Before you find out, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss the next contents. Francesca and Marco met 4 years ago in one of those places where destinies seem to magically intertwine, a beach in Sardinia at sunset. The calm sea, the light wind, and their eyes that met almost by chance. He was on vacation with friends, she with her family. From that moment on, any excuse was good to get together. It started out as a fairy tale love story, but there was one obstacle. Marco lived in Milan, Francesca in Naples. However, despite the miles of distance between them, they were both convinced that they could make the relationship work. Their lives were busy, but every evening they found time for a video call. Technology seemed to almost erase the distance, and their love seemed to grow more and more every day. It must be said that technology has revolutionized long-distance relationships. Today, distant couples can feel closer than ever thanks to the infinite video calling platforms. Yet, these same platforms, as Francesca and Marco's story demonstrates, can also become fertile ground for deception and betrayal. Despite appearances, something in the balance of their relationship had begun to crack. The signs were subtle, but Francesca, as often happens in relationships, began to perceive small cracks. Marco was less present, often late for their evening calls, and seemed increasingly distant, even when they were online. At first, Francesca told herself that it was probably just stress. After all, Marco had recently started a new job, and she saw him exhausted. But there's something curious and interesting about long-distance relationships. The perception of betrayal is different. A 2020 study conducted by the University of Colorado Boulder found that people in long-distance relationships tend to feel more vulnerable and suspicious, precisely because of the inability to physically control their partner. Not seeing each other in person can create an invisible tension that, in the long run, becomes fertile ground for doubts and insecurities. This tension also began to creep in between Francesca and Marco. One evening, after Marco was late for their video call yet again, Francesca began to notice small details that had escaped her attention until then. Silent messages arriving on Marco's phone during calls, a cold and distant tone of voice, and above all that evasive expression that she couldn't decipher. Then, that fateful evening happened. It was a Friday night. Francesca had prepared dinner for herself and had organized everything for the usual video call with Marco. He, as always, was late, but this time Francesca felt that something was wrong. When he finally appeared on the screen, Marco seemed strangely agitated. But what immediately caught Francesca's attention was a background noise, a laugh, feminine, and too close to be a simple work colleague on the phone. "Who's with you?" Francesca asked, trying to stay calm but feeling her heart beating wildly. Marco paused for a moment, then responded with what sounded like a rehearsed excuse. "Oh, she's just a colleague. We're working on a project together." Francesca felt a shiver down her spine. Her mind was full of doubts, and in an instant, the images of the two of them together, happy, seemed light years away. From that evening, she could not get that voice out of her head. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Marco became more distant, making excuses not to see each other, and skipping video calls more and more frequently. Francesca began to dig into social media, looking for signs of cheating. It's interesting how social media can become a tool for investigation, and Francesca was no exception. One day, while scrolling through Marco's photos, she noticed that a colleague, the same woman she had spoken to that evening, was often commenting on his photos with emojis that were too intimate to be merely friendly. This discovery was the final blow to her hopes that she had misunderstood the situation. She decided to take action. A week later, without telling Marco, she booked a flight to Milan. She needed to see with her own eyes what was happening. The idea was to show up unexpectedly at his house, in a classic romantic gesture, or at least that was the initial plan. Arriving in Milan, with her heart in her throat and a mix of emotions between anger, sadness, and hope, she headed towards Marco's apartment. As soon as she turned the corner of his street, she saw him. And he wasn't alone. Marco walked out the door, holding his colleague's hand. The same woman from the video call. They were laughing together. They seemed like a perfect couple. Francesca's world collapsed in an instant. She hid behind a car, unable to face him at the moment. Her heart was beating so hard, she was afraid she would be discovered. She took a taxi and immediately returned to the airport, tears flowing uncontrollably. She couldn't believe it. The love story she had thought was so solid, that had endured the distance, was now destroyed by a betrayal. Long-distance relationships are often more vulnerable to cheating because of the lack of physical presence. According to research from Brigham Young University, those in long-distance relationships are 30% more likely to cheat on their partner than those in a relationship in the same city. Distance can make it easier to lie, hide secrets, and in the minds of those who cheat, there is a lower perception of the consequences. It's not just about physical distance, but also emotional. Sometimes, people in these relationships are looking for an immediate connection, something they can't find with a distant partner. And that can make someone slide into infidelity, even when there's love. The next evening, Francesca received a call from Marco, the usual video call. This time, however, she had a plan. She decided to confront him, but not right away. She wanted to see him crumble under the weight of his own lies. "How are you?" asked Marco, apparently unaware of what Francesca had discovered. "It's okay," she replied in a voice that sounded calm but tense. "Look, I surprised you yesterday, but I think the surprise was for me." Marco remained silent. "What are you talking about?" Francesca kept her composure. "I was in Milan, Marco. I saw you, with your colleague." Marco looked petrified. "I can explain," he began, but Francesca didn't give him time to continue. "And you, have you ever found yourself in a situation like this? Have you ever discovered a long-distance betrayal? Write it in the comments below the video." The conversation continued with Marco desperately trying to justify himself, but every word he said seemed to only make the situation worse. Francesca had already made up her mind. That evening would be the last time they would speak. But it wasn't over yet. When Marco realized he was losing everything, he made an unexpected confession. "Francesca, there's something I've never told you." Before revealing this intriguing ending, we ask you to give this video a nice like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss out on all our next incredible stories of deception and betrayal. Francesca remained silent. She felt that a truth was coming that she was not ready to hear. Marco lowered his voice, and in a tone that betrayed shame, confessed, "It wasn't just the distance. I felt lonely, yes, but there was another reason. I had a relationship with your friend Sylvia." Francesca's world collapsed for the second time. Sylvia, her best friend, the one who knew everything about her, had been involved in this betrayal. The long-distance betrayal wasn't just a matter of miles or a colleague. It was a deep, personal wound involving the people closest to Francesca. A double betrayal that had struck her in the heart, leaving her speechless. That video call, which began with the usual dynamics of a long-distance relationship, ended with a devastating confession. Francesca ended the call without saying a word. She had lost everything: a love, a friendship, and the trust she had built over the years. What about you? Would you have ever imagined that a betrayal could have so many levels? Write me in the comments what you think and if you know of similar stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next stories of deception and betrayal.